Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today for this Micronaut in Action webinar. I'm Jen. I work with the 2GM team here at OCI, and we are really excited for our special guest presenters, Carlos and Silvio from Novatec. And we also have with us Sergio from the OCI Micronaut team. Today, we're going to get to see the framework's potential in real life, not only the positive aspects of the development process, but also obstacles encountered and their solutions. In this live case study, Carlos and Silvio will answer some questions about why they chose Micronaut and what it has done for them. So we're really excited to hear all about it. As a reminder, all of the participants today are going to be muted during the presentation. So please do load up your questions in the Q&A section of the portal as you have them. And we'll be doing a live Q&A session at the end and answer as many of your questions as time allows. And as a reminder, we are also recording this session and we'll plan to make it available to view on demand in the next few days. So I believe that is all for me as far as housekeeping goes. So Carlos, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Carlos Barragan, and Jen mentioned we will talk today about Micronaut in action, our experience with the Micronaut from the developer perspective, how we started with Micronaut up to production, what is our experience overall. So let's quick start with the talk. Yeah, so just a couple of words about us. Silvio and I worked at Novatec. Novatec is a mid-sized company in Germany, South Germany, in Stuttgart. We develop applications for many customers in many industries like automotive, insurance, banking. We also provide consulting about IT solutions and IT services, as well as agile methodologies. So yeah, and we are pretty excited to keep this talk about Micronaut. So I will give the word to Silvio so he can guide you through the agenda and start talking about it.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos, and also heartily welcome from my side. Yeah, we're going to talk about Micronaut in action and in production, and I really want to emphasize the two keywords here in production, because there are a lot of frameworks and technologies out there in the internet where you can find like Hello World examples where everything is just working out of the box and it's performing pretty fast, and basically all the good stuff you want to have in your software. But when it comes to, facing a productive environment where you get like thousands, 10,000s, or even 100,000s of requests per minute, then technologies start to struggle. And today we want to discover if Micronaut is able to face like productive environments with exactly those challenges. So for this, we brought the agenda here, where we're first going to talk about what Micronaut is basically, and afterwards we will introduce you to our business case on like a high level, right? And after that, we're also going to make you familiar with our technical stack, which we're using alongside with Micronaut. And after that, we will discover why we choose Micronaut in the first place and what we have learned further down the road. And after that, Carlos will show some production figures of our application and also compare a Micronaut with a similar Spring Boot application. And at the end, he will conclude this talk. So let's see what Micronaut actually is. Micronaut is a micro framework, and as micro frameworks are not reflection based, it's way more likely that they are lightweight, they use less memory, and they have faster startup times. Also, Micronaut focuses on simplicity of development and speed of development, so it does a lot for you in the background, like Spring, for example, does as well, so that you can really like focus on developing business value. So let's jump over to our business case. So I was like I was talking about, we have our Micronaut service, and our service is talking with a bunch of other services. I just want to mention three, just to keep it simpler. There are a couple of more, but anyway, we are communicating with those services in an asynchronous way. And also, what we have in place is a database. And that database communication works also in an asynchronous way. So that's our base. Now, I want to highlight one of those services, which is the session service. This service is rather, from time to time at least, unreliable, which means that we don't receive like a response. And for our business case, it's crucial to know that as long as this service does not respond with a successful response, then the whole request is going to fail. It doesn't matter what answer the other services are delivering. So that means if this service fails, all our clients fail. And if the clients fail, they have like a retry implemented, which makes them retry the same call over and over again, like every 5 or 6, 7 minutes, something like that. So that leads from like a normal request load to like these peak loads, which are going on sometimes for 3, 4, or 5, or even 6 hours. And these are some challenges our service needs to face. So that's exactly what I'm telling you this, because this is absolutely no hello world example. This is a production. These are a lot of requests, and our service needs to deal with that. So let's get over to the technical stack we were using alongside Micronaut. So basically, our base, as I said, was Micronaut. We started, I think, with version 1.2.4, and we are also using Kotlin with it. And when we started that service, we used Reactor for the implementation of the asynchronous paradigm, which I was talking about earlier. We were using a Reactor because at that point in time when we started, Micronaut had no support for coroutines yet. So we went with Reactor. Also, we are using a Cosmos database from Microsoft, and we are talking to that database via its Mongo API. And also we are using resilience for J. Although Micronaut is bringing some resilience feature already, back in the days we were not quite satisfied about the way we could implement a circuit breaker, and that's why we fell back at resilience for J. Our application is running in a Kubernetes cluster, and this is hosted on Microsoft Azure. What I also wanted to mention is regarding monitoring, which is not mentioned on the slide. We are using Micrometer statsd library for publishing our metrics from our application to Datadog. There's one thing I want to mention in addition, which is that once we upgraded from Micronaut 1.3 to the new major version, Datadog was no longer able to instrument the new classes from our Mongo API. So due to the update to Micronaut 2, a lot of Mongo libraries changed, and that's why Datadog was no longer able to instrument those classes out of the box. However, we raised an issue on Datadog side, and they fixed it, and this is now working again smoothly. Also, we are shipping our logs to Azure Log Analytics using SLF4J with the logback implementation. So let's go over to why we used Micronaut in the first place. So one big key indicator was performance for us. And when it comes to performance, there are like 2 main factors we have. The first one is low memory consumption, and the second one is fast startup times. So let me explain this. Low memory consumption is for us important because we are running in a Kubernetes environment, and since the resources available are restricted, it is good when we have like less memory consumption, because then we could, in theory, deploy more services on our cluster, which is paid anyway. So that's good. On the other hand, fast startup times. Let me share an anecdote with you. I just experienced last Monday, I think. I was in charge of deploying one of our monoliths still, and well, since it's a bigger application and it's not yet like using modern features and modern technologies yet, it's still quite heavy. And well, I was in charge of deploying these two monoliths on our productive environment. So once I started, it took me like I guess for one region only, one stage and one region only, it took me like an hour to have one monolith deployed on a productive environment. Just because we have this rolling upgrade strategy in place of Kubernetes, which means that we are deploying one new pod with a newer version and shut down like the older version. And that just takes some time, because until the application server is started, it takes like 5 or 6 minutes. And since we have like 6 pods, that takes like already 40 to 50 minutes until one stage is deployed. So that's quite heavy. On the other hand, at the same day, I also deployed our service, our Micronaut service, also on a productive environment, and that happened in like 5 minutes. Although we have even more pods, and that just saves money in the end, right? Because one does not like spend all day long just to watch over the deployment process, but you need to do that because like on production, anything can happen, so anything can fail, and you want to keep an eye on that. So it's important that you have fast startup times to get faster feedback. So you have like an increased employee productivity, which in the end saves money, because the developers can focus really on like the important stuff of their job, right, and not just watching deployments. So let's get over to the next point, which would be the diversity of features which Micronaut is offering. So I was already talking about reactive stuff. It supports reactive out of the box, like I was talking about Reactor and also RxJava. But since 1.3, I think it also supports coroutines, which we are not using in this particular service I was mentioning before, but we also have another Micronaut service in place where we now make use of coroutines as well instead of Reactor. So that's quite good. Then the next point would be cloud features. So there's a lot of going on there. And also what I want to highlight here is that since Micronaut is like still young framework, it has had the chance to like really focus on these cloud features, right? So all the code base can like evolve around the idea of having like cloud features in place, in comparison with other frameworks which were already there before like cloud was really that big of a topic. They need to shift their focus on those cloud features. Just to name a few, there's like service discovery with Eureka Kubernetes. There's distributed tracing with Zipkin and Jagger. There are distributed configuration with Spring Cloud Config or AWS Parameter Store. Also, there's support for serverless functions with Azure Functions, Google Cloud Functions, and so on and so on. So there's already a lot of going on there. So next point would be the language support. So as I said, we are using Kotlin because we're just like loving Kotlin in Novatec. But there's also support for Java and Groovy, and support for GraalVM images. And last but not least, there's also a lot of support for databases like Postgres. I was talking about Mongo, SQL, Redis, and so on and so on. So basically, there's already a lot of stuff which is shipped with Micronaut out of the box. So the next point is the low entry barrier. Yeah. So basically, I don't think we mentioned that before, but Carlos and I had like very good expertise with Spring Boot applications as well. So it's and since Micronaut is feeling like very Spring Bootish in a way, there was the entry barrier was very low for us because as you can see in screenshot, even if you are not familiar with Micronaut yet, but if you are familiar with Spring, I'm pretty sure you can see what this code is doing. So there are a lot of these annotation type thingies you're already familiar from Spring, and yeah, like the add controller, singleton, add get, add path variable, and so on and so on. So there's, for example, also like factory and configuration properties and all that good stuff we already are loving from Spring. So yeah, that's basically good, and we could really like come up to speed very quickly, and we didn't like lose a lot of time to get familiar with all the environment Micronaut has to offer. So, and last but not least, the responsive community. Yeah, during our road to production, we faced some issues, and we opened issues for that on GitHub. And yeah, we were surprised how fast the community is responding to those requests. And I really want to highlight the first issue we had, the memory leak, when request body is anything but JSON. Just because we were provided in this particular case with a snapshot build, which at that point in time just ran in our productive environment. So, and it just worked, and that felt very, very great. Also, what I want to mention is recently I was also active on GitHub of Micronaut, and I'm also getting like fast responses over there, and they really try to help people out, and that's really positive feeling when interaction as a developer with the community is working like that. So that's pretty awesome. And with that, I'm finished with my part of the talk, and I would hand over to Carlos.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, we're gonna start talking about our production figures, and we have this our normal production figures, which as you can see, we have about 7,500 requests per minute. I think right now it's a little bit above that. We have 6 nodes, and in average we have like 220 megabytes heap in average memory consumption. We have 6 fixed nodes. This is because of the way our customer provides the Kubernetes cluster. Like in production, they tell you, yeah, you have 6 nodes, and that's all you get. You don't get more, and you don't get less. So we said, okay, we have 6 nodes. We deploy then six instances to our cluster. I am pretty confident we could get also good numbers with less instances or with less nodes, but that's the way it is now. And yeah, as Silvio mentioned, we have from time to time some peak figures, and it's really going. We get a lot of requests per minute when something goes wrong with this session service that Silvio mentioned, because our clients start to retry like every 5 minutes, and there are a lot of these clients. So we get like 200,000 requests per minute. And as you can see, what is impressive here, well, the megabit heap, the consumption, memory consumption, goes not really that high. I think it's pretty acceptable, and we don't have something like horizontal autoscaling or something like that. We always have 6 instances running. we see no need to use horizontal scaling because the application can handle that pretty well. I mean, our peaks have shown that our metrics have shown that the application can handle all this load pretty well. I have some screenshot here from that peak from our metrics just to show you. I think that was our record. Yeah, these are of course peaks, but we have also observed times where we get loads from, I don't know, 50, 60,000 requests per minute for a longer period of time, like I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, and the application is running smoothly. That was also a very nice feeling to see how the framework could handle that load, and it's very stable. It didn't go, I don't know, it didn't produce to memory leaks or didn't go to high in memory consumption. We also have the case that we had to deploy a fix while we were receiving a lot of requests or above the normal figures. And that was also nice feelings to see how fast we could deploy, as Silvio mentioned, like in a couple of minutes, we deployed the whole production stage while handling heavy load. That was a very nice feeling to see how responsive everything is. Yeah, and as Silvio also mentioned, we have a lot of experience with Spring Boot. We started with Spring Boot also a couple of, I don't know, years ago, 5 years, 6 years ago, like really doing Spring Boot stuff in production. So we have a lot of experience also in that area, and for that, we want to provide a little bit comparison to one of the components that we have on production with Spring Boot. We selected, we have many applications on Spring Boot also on our Kubernetes cluster running there. We selected one application that is more or less similar to functionality with this Micronaut application. It's also fully reactive, and I think the only difference is that it does not have a database. It only routes requests. So it's more or less like this. We have a service Spring Boot application. We have 2 services, and one service, our application gets a request from the clients. It calls one service, gets a response. It calls the next service, gets a response, and then delivers a response to the clients. So that's all that it does. It does not do anything with the database. It just gets a response to see everything's okay, and if it's okay, then calls the next service. So it's not that difficult. It's actually pretty straightforward. And yeah, you can say it's a little bit lighter, or the job is a little bit easier in this case as in the Micronaut application. So to give you some idea about the numbers, we prepare a small comparison table. And well, you can see this is a snapshot, I think, from a couple of months ago. We are already in Micronaut 2.2, I think. So yeah, you see the memory consumption, although it's more or less the same. Well, you also can see that our Micronaut application gets way more requests per minute than the Spring Boot application. And what is, for me, very fascinating is always the startup time. You see, these are startup time on production on the Kubernetes cluster, not on my machine. In my machine, it starts under 1 second. And this is what Silvio talked about at the beginning. When you see the hello worlds and all these examples, it's very good just for the tutorials and you get the feeling. But when you start seeing the application on production on a cluster on a node where you have limited resources, that is when this kind of stuff shines and gives you a good feeling of how good the framework is or the good the technology is. Yeah, and this is not attack to bash Spring or something. Spring is also a wonderful framework. It's a very mature framework. It's not about that. It's just to give you some idea about how the both applications behave. And yeah, also another important point about the startup time, it's takes a little bit longer because, as Silvio mentioned, we use Datadog and we have to deploy some Java agents also. And this takes a little bit of time when doing the bootstrapping. I think we tested once without the agents and it was under 3 seconds or something like that. This was pretty fast for yeah, a Java application on Kubernetes. Yeah, and you see also the build time is a little bit higher in Micronaut. Well, it's a little bit bigger. The application is a little bit bigger than the Spring Boot one, but also it executes more tests, and we use test containers, so we have to bootstrap a Docker container to test database stuff, and that takes a little bit more of time in comparison to the Spring Boot application, which does not have a database. But yeah, if you were worried about, okay, Micronaut does a lot of stuff in compiling time, it will take a little bit longer, yes, but it's not, or at least in our experience, it's not pretty significant. It's not noticeable, in my opinion. Yeah, so this is the numbers. So this is the comparison we wanted to give you, so you can see a little bit about how it behaves like a use case on production. I want to start another small topic in this talk, and it's that we as Novatec are also doing some open source stuff with Micronaut in this regard. We are doing so-called Micronaut Camunda BPM integration. If you don't know, Camunda BPM is open source library. It's a workflow or a business process engine library, and we kind of provide like an extension for you to use Micronaut and Camunda together. So there is already support for Spring Boot, for instance, in Camunda, and we decided, well, why not give it a shot and provide a kind of extension for Micronaut. And as you can see, it's open source. If you want to take a look, there's a link. You can participate also in the discussions. My colleague Tobias Schäfer is well the lead of this extension, and if you are interested, please take a look. Feedback is always welcome. Yeah, another thing that we didn't mention at the beginning, because we added this like last minute, is that we have yet another Micronaut service in production, and this is a little bit bigger than the first one. We wanted to share just some insights about this service. So as you can see, it's a little bit bigger. It's what we have right now is the 25,000 requests per minute. So you see it's a little bit, it's a lot of requests. We have 8 nodes also running because we have 2 clusters, also because of availability. So it's like 4 nodes per clusters. We have like 100 milliseconds latency and an average heap for 140 megabytes. So yeah, this is the new service that I think we took in production, I think a month ago or 2 months ago. And yeah, we wanted to show you, well, we are very satisfied with Micronaut that we decided, okay, let's go with the next new component and also try Micronaut with that. So yes, to conclude this talk, yeah, as you can see, we already confirmed with the new service where my Micronaut is, of course, production ready. We can testify that. I think it delivers on this promise of low memory consumption and fast startup times. We already experienced that. We show you the numbers. Yeah, I think it delivers pretty much all the promises it made. Also, another point that is quite important and is almost many times forgotten is the feedback. Like you get some of feedback during compilation time, like you misconfigure something or one bin is not available or whatever, it cannot resolve something. You get this information or get this feedback at compilation time and not at runtime, which is also pretty good, pretty awesome, because, well, quicker feedback is quicker fixes, and your productivity is also taking advantage of that. So yeah, and also the response time and quality from the Micronaut team is are very great. As Silvio mentioned, the feeling that you get a custom build to you for test on production if the fix works is quite nice. That was very awesome. Like it's like first level support more or less. And also, as Silvio mentioned, the easy to use and understand, because, well, the programming model is pretty similar to Spring Boot, and actually you can use a Spring Boot application and migrate it to Micronaut quite easily. They support a lot of the Spring Boot annotations, so there is a very easy migration path there. If you have already a Spring Boot application and just want to test Micronaut, for instance, to see, I want to see the runtime of Micronaut, well, it's pretty easy to do that. In the documentation of Micronaut, you can find more about that. So yeah, that's pretty much our talk, pretty much our webinar today. If you have any questions or comments, we are ready for that.
Thanks, guys. That was really, really interesting and great to see all of the success that you had and the features that you were using, and excited to hear that you guys have another one in production. So
oh yeah, it says, how do you compare Micronaut with another micro frameworks like Ktor and Helidon? I think from my point of view, Micronaut is the one of all the micro frameworks, maybe together with Quarkus or a little bit more, that provides more functionality. Like you have a lot more of features in the framework, more integrations with other stuff like Kafka integration, Redis, and all that stuff is there. With Ktor is a little bit more specific, like you have a web server, a very, very fast web server, but it's still like not very feature rich as Micronaut. Also Helidon is also the same way, I think. How Micronaut is related to Project Helidon, I heard they can be integrated. I'm not sure about that. I don't think, or I don't know if, I think they are a little bit different in the way they, I mean, they are similar in the way that they do a lot of stuff in compile time, but that you can use it together, I'm not sure that you can do that. Do you have more features than Quarkus? Probably yes. I haven't counted like one per one, but I think Micronaut has pretty much, or is maybe one of the micro frameworks with the most features. I mean, both frameworks are pretty good. We decided to go with Micronaut because also back in the day when we started, we saw that okay, we can start with this micro framework and it provides a lot of features. So we are like future proof. But if it has more or less, I don't know, I think you have to count it, but I think it has a lot, just like that. Do you plan on using? Yeah, so
I'm going to answer a couple of questions. So there was a question about which version do we recommend to use in production, and we recommend to use the latest stable. So right now it will be 2.21, I believe. You can always get a link to the latest stable version if you go directly to micronaut.io. Essentially, Micronaut uses semantic version. So there is like a major version, a minor, and a patch. There are no breaking changes between minor patch versions, only major versions. In patch version, we'll introduce bug fixes, and in minor versions, we introduce like new features. So if you are, so we have like a cadence of, so we release patch versions that we are fixing bugs, but typically like every 2 weeks, you will see like a patch version. More or less every 6 to 8 weeks, you will see like a minor version. But yeah, we recommend you to keep up with the latest version. Regarding Ktor, and also like how it does relate to other frameworks such as Helidon. So we see Micronaut it's kind of a marketing thing, but it's true. It's like a foundation technology. So many of us, myself included, most of the times we are using the Micronaut native runtime, where you have like an HTTP server, but you can use Micronaut dependency injection in other contexts. You can use Micronaut dependency injection in a command line application, or you can use some of the features of Micronaut, for example, in a Ktor application. We have integration with Ktor so that you can have dependency injection in your Ktor applications, or it's easy to integrate a Micronaut HTTP client, for example, in a Spring Boot application as well. So it's, I think it's, so you will see if you check our, in our Micronaut Kotlin module, you will see the Ktor support. So you see that the Ktor is a bit more bare bones. And if you combine it with Micronaut, you will see like, you will get some of framework features that you are used to. I had a couple of also like points regarding of some of the points that Silvio and Carlos made regarding the Spring Boot similarities and the Spring Boot programming model. And that's not coincidence. The creators of Micronaut as the creators of Grails, which is a framework which was built on top of Spring and has been successfully running for the last decade. So we love Spring and we love the Spring way of doing things, and the things that we thought were great that the Spring did, you will find them in Micronaut. So that's absolutely there. Another thing about community that Silvio mentioned is about using Gitter. We are also opening, so GitHub has included a feature called discussions. So in the repos, you will see like a discussion tab. I think they made it open today for most repos. We already had it in the Micronaut core repo. So that's kind of a Stack Overflow question and answer kind of forum. When you are unclear whether the thing is like not working, or you are unclear, or when you are not sure if you need to create an issue, we encourage you to use that as well. So yeah, those things. Let me see if I am able to answer all questions. So yeah, the Micronaut and the Helidon projects, they are separate things. So we are like, as I said, like improving the foundations of Micronaut to play well with Helidon. But it's like right now, I would say it's probably a safe thing to say that they are like two different frameworks that you will choose one or the other. About the number of features than Quarkus, as Carlos said, I don't know. You can see that we have a vast amount of features. If you go to docs.micronaut.io, you will see that we have a really modularized project. There is a question for you guys, for Carlos and Silvio, about do you plan on using coroutines with Micronaut? So if you can answer that, Silvio.
Yeah. So the last service we were talking about, the new one we just took in production, is actually using already coroutines. And as you also could see based on the figures Carlos presented, it's working pretty good. So we take like 25K requests per minute, and we have like an average response time of less than 100 milliseconds. And also the memory consumption is still very, very low. So that works out quite fine. Of course, sometimes there are some challenges, because the coroutines concept needs to be understood. Otherwise, you will also running into some problems. Also, recently we had like a smaller problem with the cacheable annotation, for example, which is basically not working good with coroutines because the way the continuation parameter works. So you would need to implement your own caching, basically. I'm not sure if there are like other solutions, but yeah, that's so basically it's if you want to use coroutines with Micronaut, just go for it. I would recommend it.
Yes, just a point around that. We have added some improvements, I believe, in Micronaut 2.2. There was many bug fixes and many improvements around coroutines. If any of you, as Silvio was describing, find any behavior that is currently misbehaving or it's falling short, please submit an issue, because yeah, anything that we can do to improve the calling experience, it's always best if it comes from the community who is using this in real life scenarios. And there is another question for you, Silvio, is were there any situations where you lacked integration libraries?
Basically, some days ago, we were starting to think about the integration with Azure Event Hub. And I know that Spring is offering some integration with Azure Event Hubs, but I don't think Micronaut is at the moment. So we are basically forced to use the Java libraries which are offered by Microsoft.
So if I understood correctly, you set Azure events, right?
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, we are also working on improvement the Azure support. So there have been some big improvements in 2.2 on that arena. But the same as I said before, we need the help of the community to know the areas to improve. because there are so many cloud providers with so many vast
Yeah,
amount of
of
features
course.
that we need absolutely feedback from the community. And there is another questions around, do you use the API gateway tool in your application?
Nope, we don't use it. We I think we implemented because of the way Soul works in the I think you meant the Spring Boot application. The way it works, you cannot use the gateway because you have to call the service, verify some stuff, and then call the other service. So it's just not a gateway. So it does a little bit more stuff. That's why we didn't use it. And also I think Soul is already not deprecated, but it's I think in maintenance mode. I think, yeah.
So there is another questions around, which disappeared from my view right now. What can still you do in a Spring Boot that is not possible right now in Micronaut? So I don't know if you want to take that. For sure, there are many things. So Spring Boot is a huge project with a vast amount of libraries. So we don't have like an integration for everything. I think we have an integration for pretty much the big ticket items, but I mean, the Spring Boot is, and the Spring ecosystem is huge. So for sure you will find some things that that we don't have like an integration with. I don't know if you found anything that you were using a Spring Boot that is missing in Micronaut.
Well, I think what Silvio mentioned, the integration with the Event Hub. I mean, you can use the Spring Cloud Binder for that, for instance. I mean, you can use we already use that and in the Spring Boot, but I mean, you can still use Event Hub, but maybe not as with this kind of abstraction in the Micronaut, perhaps. I mean, it's no showstopper in that regard, but yeah, I think that's perhaps some of the points that are missing. As you say, well, my Spring Boot is a pretty mature, big framework with a lot of integration. So yeah, there are a lot of stuff that Spring can do.
Yeah. When you guys upgrade versions, how many days does it usually takes? I think that's a question probably for you. I think that's an upgrade between Micronaut versions. I assume that you update your application.
Yeah, so I mean, we do it more or less on a regular basis, like not like once per week or so, or once every 2 weeks, but like these minor changes can easily be applied, so that doesn't take too long. We're just like increasing the version, deploy it on our test stages, see if everything works, fire a couple of requests, have some integration tests, and yeah, just let it run. And even on production, you will figure it out if you have like good monitoring also in place. Yeah, if it fails on production, then you just roll it back. But yeah, that's
in that regard, we are making really a big effort to avoid breaking changes, which is sometimes a pain for us as framework developers, but we are really being careful about really not introducing breaking changes, and also like, for example, not updating major versions of dependencies between patch versions or minor versions, because we don't want to break applications. So we really want to encourage people to keep upgrading, because upgrading patch versions should be extremely safe. Upgrading a patch version should be a celebration, if you allow me, because it's like you are only getting bug fixes, right? You shouldn't get any surprises, you should only get improvements when you upgrade a patch version. And upgrading a minor version should be also like a celebration, because in theory, the only thing that you are going to get is new features of the framework, right? No regressions. So we are being quite strict. And if you find that we are not, please tell us and shame on us. But I think we are doing a good job. And I think what Silvio is doing, I think should be probably the experience for most of people, like upgrading between versions. Most of the times it's just changing. If you are using Grader, it's changing like the Micronaut version in the Grader properties file. There is another question. Have you experimented with GraalVM at all? If so, does it look promising in this use case?
We have experimented with GraalVM. We don't use our current services with GraalVM. Why? because I think the feedback is still too long. I mean, until you get your native application and everything built and deployed takes too long. And too long is maybe, well, a couple of minutes, 8, 9 minutes compared to the, I don't know, 1 minute that it takes to build a normal jar. And for this use case, for this specific use case, we didn't see the need. I mean, you saw the numbers. I think they're pretty good. I mean, the memory consumption is pretty good. The latency is pretty good, and the scalability is also pretty good. So we didn't see the need to use this the Grail VM images. So we have experimented with it, but we don't have anything in production yet.
So we have a similar questions, which was, so I think it's answered with this question as well from Kirk, which he asked if you were already using RVM in the applications. So yeah, the answer of that is they have tried, but in production, they're not using RVM native images of the apps. Does Micronaut support any of the microprofile APIs? And that is a question probably for me, which I don't really know the answer to. I think we have not really. I believe the answer is not really, but don't really trust on me. We have, I don't think so, but we can probably get better on. Which JVM Micronaut works better? I don't know exactly. So I don't think we are comparing, like, I don't know if the question is if you were like testing like the same app in Zulu JDK or in Amazon Corretto JDK or in, I don't think we have, I don't think we have any comparisons. I don't know if you guys have experience with that.
Well, what we're using, I can tell you what we're using. We're using the OpenJDK. I mean the normal version, and I think we are on JDK 14. I think. Or JDK 15, I don't know. I think JDK 14, but no, well, we haven't tested it on other JVMs. No.
There is another question about the same is which Java version is best to use. So in terms of Java version, my answer always to the people of these questions is use the, so personally what I do is, if my cloud provider or where I am deploying supports Java 11, go or the latest stable version of Java that my cloud provider supports, that's the Java version that I am using. Because so we are running or we are compiling all the projects against the Java 11, Java 8, and Java 15, I believe. So we are testing the latest, the long-term supported releases. But I think the best thing to do is try to use the latest stable, so the most modern stable version of Java, because you will get like improvements just for doing that. So that was a question for Jan. Then there is a question from Marius about what about IDE support? What IDE do you guys use to work with? I personally use always IntelliJ IDEA, and that works fantastic with Micronaut.
Yeah, way too.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
I know some people in the team here at OCI use also Visual Studio Code. I've heard people that tell that works really nice with Java. I don't use it myself. I use IntelliJ. I know IntelliJ, both the community and the Ultimate Edition, works great with Micronaut. IntelliJ has also integration with the Micronaut launch. So you are able to create like a Micronaut application directly with a wizard directly from the IDE. So yeah, if you ask my preference is IntelliJ IDEA. How do you feel? That's probably a question for you, Silvio and Carlos. How do you feel about the Micronaut Foundation? If you have any feelings about that.
Well, I think it's a good idea to, I mean, just a general idea to have like a separator from the company, you know, like an independent foundation. If what is the question target at? But I think it's good. I think it's great for the community.
Yep, I agree. I think it's great that it's probably a vehicle that allows more companies to get involved with Micronaut and also feel like more reassured that the framework is like open to other companies, not just us. Can you tell something about testing? So what do you guys use to test? Do you use JUnit? Do you use Kotlin test, or what testing framework do you use?
We are using JUnit.
JUnit?
Yeah.
So I find for Kotlin applications, we are defaulting in Micronaut Starter, in Micronaut Launch to generate like a JUnit 5, which I think it's pretty nice. I personally, my testing framework of choice is Spock, because I come from the Groovy community and I have experience with Groovy. So if you have experience with Groovy or you want to see like an awesome test framework, check Spock. But JUnit 5 is really nice as well. So you should be in good hands with those. We have also so there are all, like so many Kotlin testing frameworks popping up all the time. So we are all now like generating projects with Kotlin test. But if you think we should be bringing possibilities to use another one, please let us know, because yeah, we rely on the community support to know what's best for the Kotlin community. There is another question from Martin. Do you plan to have integration with ActiveMQ? Because I see in your documentation that for now you only have with RabbitMQ. I don't know. So I know for messaging we have integration with Rabbit, we have integration with Kafka. We brought in a Micronaut 2.2 also with MQTT, but I have no idea if we don't have support with ActiveMQ or if there is any plans. I don't know. If that's something that you really think that we are missing, please create an issue and we will probably put it in the backlog for future releases. Following the same thing about gaps between Spring Boot and Micronaut, is it possible to mix both frameworks? We have a Micronaut module called Micronaut for Spring, which allows you to use Spring annotations and basically at compilation time map them to Micronaut annotations. So you will get like basically the Micronaut features without leaving your preference for using REST controller. But honestly, I don't think the transition from moving a code base the annotations is that hard. But we do have one module called Micronaut for Spring. You can find a link to that in docs.micronaut.io. And in combining both, so you can use some features of Micronaut in Spring Boot applications. For example, Grails, the framework Grails, which Grails applications are Spring Boot applications. They set the Micronaut application context as the Spring Boot application context. So essentially in Grails application, you can mix both. So you can basically combine Spring Boot with Micronaut. And also you can use things such as the Micronaut HTTP client in a Spring Boot application, no problem. The Micronaut HTTP client is something that you can use everywhere, basically. Can you elaborate more about your experience with Micrometer integration? That's a question for you, Silvio and Carlos.
Yeah. So basically, it's just adding the dependency. You can also find it on Micronaut.io, and also the documentation about it is pretty good. And yeah, I mean, adding the dependency, adding the configuration in your application is basically all you need to do. So we also have like, as I was talking about earlier, we are running in a Kubernetes environment, and we have like Datadog agents deployed there, and we also have the Java agent attached to our application. And with that combined, we are getting all the metrics and shipping them to Datadog in the end. So this is more or less as you would expect it to work, like more or less out of the box, basically.
Thank you, Silvio. We have a question from Goran about what about security authentication? Do you use Micronaut security?
We use, I think, in the new service. I don't know if you use it, Silvio.
Well, we're using some. I think we're using some features, yes, but I would need to look that up.
I think we are behind. Yeah, it's not a firewall, but well, we are protected with a like a security gateway. Before the request comes to the service, we have a security gateway that manages the tokens and all this stuff. So I think what we do with the new component is like we just parse the token and see what kind of groups are in. But I think that's pretty much what we do in that case.
Yeah, but that's also something you can like configure in your application YAML as well. So there's some support for that as well.
We had another question also about whether we support the Micronaut RS socket, and I just checked. I don't think we do, but we have an issue with a lot of upvotes. I am going to paste the link in the chat. So if that's something that you want us to support, join the crowd, because some people are already like requesting that. But I don't think we do. I don't think we have any support for that. I just found Google in that Dmitry Korlinov later project says they have integration with Micronaut. Yeah, they are like, we are like, I think they're like improving the integration. I don't know exactly the level of integration that Helidon has, but I think there are some efforts being done to improve that experience and basically use some parts of Micronaut within a Helidon project. Is there any advantage to use Java instead of Groovy for the application code, specifically for creating a GraalVM native image? So Martin, if your goal is to create a GraalVM native image, my recommendation is not to use Groovy. As much as I love Groovy, and I do love Groovy a lot, and I think it's a really great language, Groovy uses for some things uses reflection, and doesn't play well with GraalVM native image generation. So it is possible doing a lot of configuration, but if the end goal is to create a GraalVM native image, I think either Java or Kotlin are better programming languages for that goal. There is another question for Rafael Grisotto, which is easy to upgrade Micronaut versions? I am talking about breaking things because it's a relative new framework. So it's, I mean, it is, if you compare it with Grace, it's a new framework, but we open source Micronaut in 2018. So we have been already releasing versions for productions for 2 years. So I think it's at this point is safe. And we are being really, again, we are being really quite strict about following semantic version to the letter. So I think it's an easy upgrade from version to version. If you are upgrading from Micronaut 1 to Micronaut 2, there were some breaking changes there and they were documented. So so when there is like a Micronaut 3, probably next spring or next summer, we will take the opportunity to remove some deprecated code and do necessary breaking changes. But until that point, there will not be any breaking changes. There is another question from Goran, which is, do you have a gateway proxy like a Spring Cloud Gateway in front of your services, or how are requests routed to the endpoints?
Well, we have, I think, in normal ingress in Kubernetes. If that's the question targeted at, I mean, that's the way we route the requests. Yeah.
So the question from Rafael about the microprofile specs, I don't know the answer to. And there is another question from Jason, which he says, can you talk more about your experience creating an open source Micronaut integration with Camunda?
Well, it is, well, right now it's let's say not 1.0 release yet. We are not yet already, but we are working on that target, and when we get there, I hope pretty soon, in probably the next couple of months, we want also to do a kind of presentation about that. And so far, I think the experience, well, what my colleague has told me, has been pretty good in the experience for community. I have also followed the repo a lot, and there are a lot of discussions, a lot of participations. So I think overall the experience is quite good.
So about if you want to create like an integration, and we really want you to create an integration, reach to us. We are happy to help people to basically create those kind of projects. We have a template project, which is the one that we use. I just pasted the link in the chat, which is the one that we use basically when we want to create a new Micronaut module. And yeah, you can basically download, and it has a starter point. Sometimes what we have is some people like start their own integrations in their own GitHub organization or in their GitHub personal account. We work with them, and sometimes they want to bring that integration inside the GitHub Micronaut projects organization. And we do have some modules there that are basically community maintained. We help them out. But yeah, that's definitely something that we want to encourage people to, is to join and build Micronaut integrations, because the more people we have working in the open source side, the best the framework is going to be for everyone. So yeah, absolutely. If you have any idea or anything that you would like the framework to do, or that you would like to extend the framework to do, please reach out, and we're happy to help. Anything about GraphQL in Micronaut? We do have support, I'm pretty sure. If not, we have support in GORM. So we have like a Micronaut GraphQL module, and if this doesn't suffice you, Micronaut can integrate with GORM, which is a data access toolkit built with Groovy, and that has also like a great GraphQL integration. So yeah, we have some support for GraphQL. Many people seems to be attracted to GraphQL. So if you think we need to have something extra that we are missing, please reach out. There is another thing is, I think a fear about going from the Spring Thorn tail to the Micronaut or required is because spec support is missing. The Jakarta now is implementing first. Do you think we need to change our mind, think about the specs? So I don't think a micro profile is a specification per se. I think it's, so we are using a lot of specifications in many places. You see the security, for example, or the injections annotations are good examples. We are using the standard JavaX inject annotation. So we are trying to use as much as possible. We really are trying to keep you as uncoupled from Micronaut as possible. But sometimes as framework creators, you have to have your own things, right? But for example, in the security module, to represent the user that is currently authenticated, we use the JavaX principal object. And we support, for example, if you want to use the permit all annotation or the roles allowed annotation, we do support that. So we are really trying to keep the lock-in as small as possible. But of course, when you are using a framework, you are coupling yourself a little bit to the framework. But yeah, I don't know what Silvio or Carlos' perspective about this. I think we are like, Micronaut doesn't really create like a strong coupling to the application code.
I think it's also a matter of how you structure your application at the end. I mean, yes, if you structure well with the corresponding boundaries and everything, your code is like not framework dependent. And I think more important than the specifications, maybe yeah, maybe one should look for the features that you want to use more than the specs or something like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't have any more questions. If anyone has any questions, please send it. We'll be here for several more minutes. If you have questions after today's webinar, We are in Twitter. You can reach us via email. Silvio and Carlos, they are on Twitter as well. So yeah, please don't hesitate. And as Silvio said, the Gitter community is a good place to hang up. And also check the GitHub discussions that we are going to open in the repos for a good, more like focused discussion point. But yeah.
And as we're waiting for some more questions to be loaded up in the Q&A, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. We allowed more time for this webinar because we had assumed that there would be quite a few questions, and there have been. So we really appreciate everybody's time, and Carlos and Silvio and Sergio, thank you so much for your time and attention to all of these questions. And hopefully folks have found your example useful, and the questions and stuff that we've discussed here. Hopefully that's been useful to folks, and they'll be able to start implementing some of that on their own. And we would love to have you guys back whenever you're ready to discuss your Camunda integration. So we look forward to a future talk with you guys to see all of that. So I think that there is maybe one or two more questions coming in. One of them that just came in was, will the recording be available? So yes, we did record the session today, and we will be providing that for you all that signed up, and then we'll post that on our website as well. So that will be available. I think that there's one more question in here. Does Micronaut have component starter like Spring Boot?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what component starter I believe is, so maybe I am giving a completely wrong answer, but we do have a website to allow you to easily explore features and create template applications using Micronaut, which is Micronaut Launch, and that's available in a URL that I'm going to paste here. If you click the features button there on the left bottom corner, you will be able to, like, I don't know, like add security or add security plus JWT or add RabbitMQ. And then if you click the preview, you will see like the kind of application that is being generated. So with Micronaut Launch, it's really easy like to generate like a skeleton or a blueprint of different kinds of application that you may be asking, working with. So I don't know if I answer you, but yeah, no idea if what Spring Boot component starters are. There's another question. Have you guys done any experiment on Micronaut plus Project Loom? I have not.
I think Project Loom is too new, too alpha. It's really difficult to do that.
And for those of you who are still on and interested in looking for a little bit more help on getting started with Micronaut, we do have a training session next week that starts on Monday and it goes through Thursday. We'll be doing 3-hour sessions each day for some online training. So please do join us for that. And I think that will help folks get started as well. As Sergio said, the guys will hang around here for a few more minutes to answer some questions. But for those of you who need to go, we understand, and thank you so much again for joining us. And we'll just keep it on here for a little bit so the guys can answer some more questions. And then we look forward to seeing you guys in our next webinar next week. Sergio and Mark Volkman will be talking about Micronaut and Svelte, which should be interesting as well. So thank you.
Yeah, we are going to be talking next. So I just pasted a link to the training that Jen mentioned in the chat. We are going to be talking next week about, so we have in the company the luck to have the author of the first, or I believe one of the first Svelte books. So Svelte is like a, maybe I'm saying it correctly, but it's like a, in the technology sphere of like Vue.js or React. So it's like a front-end framework. So we see many people like building front ends, which consumes a Micronaut API. So we are gonna show like typical things that you will face, such as API versioning or security. So we are going to show an example of a Micronaut application delegating authentication to an OpenID provider, an OpenID Connect provider such as Amazon Cognito, and communicating with a Svelte front end, completely deployed independently. And yeah, we're going to talk about API version. We are going to talk about security. We are going to talk about API documentation. I think Micronaut has an amazing integration with OpenAPI to generate OpenAPI specifications from your endpoints. So your MPI docs will be great for last. It's next Friday. So yeah, please join us if you are still not in Christmas holidays. And also for the training is a great opportunity to get more deep dive with Micronaut.
All right, well, we have not had any more questions come in the last few minutes, so we can probably wrap things up for today. So thanks guys again for your time and joining us. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to your follow-up presentation in 2021, seeing how things are going there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having us. It was a pleasure for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for telling the story, and was awesome. And yes, Jen said, looking forward to hear your success stories in the next year, which I'm sure they will be great.